Howdy, this is the Views from the Shop podcast. I'm your host, your one and only host, Tim Miller, and today it's an emergency episode on this Tuesday, October 21st, 2025, and I wish you a very, very, very happy Count Your Buttons day. Sound the alarms, wake up the neighbors, set some things on fire. It doesn't matter. This is a big day for Ohio State basketball as the Buckeyes land a commitment from a five-star in Anthony Thompson. Today, we will talk about the player that Anthony Thompson is. We'll talk about how much of an impact this is for the program and what this means for Ohio State moving forward. In short, it's a big day for Ohio State basketball. Before we get into that, as always, continue to ask that you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, follow on Twitter, follow on Instagram at The Shop Pod, and make sure you're on the Substack as well, viewsfromtheshoppodcast.substack.com. If you are looking for some extra intel on Ohio State hoops this time of year, send me a DM. I'll get you in the private Substack where I drop some news and notes and nuggets and inside scoops that aren't posted publicly or will be posted publicly at some point, and timing is just too early, but I can still at least post it there. Highly encourage you to reach out to me. Just DM me on Twitter, and I will get you a link, and you can get in for free and also see all the history of the chat as well, including that I did share that I think Anthony Thompson's going to be a Buckeye. That came this morning and a whole lot more. So encourage you to get there. If you're new here, again, please subscribe. And a 5-star review always helps the show. Shout out the Nut House. So Anthony Thompson, 5-star recruit, number 8, number 7, number 6, depending on where you look overall in the entire nation. He commits to Ohio State today over Indiana and several others. As I said, this is a big deal for Ohio State, but the Buckeyes and Jake Diebler, they keep an in-state product, which I think is highly important, especially given the gravity of what this player is. I don't think it's necessarily a huge deal to get the number one player in Ohio every single year, because some years the number one player in Ohio, he may be a 3-star, maybe a lower 3-star, depending on the year in Ohio State basketball. But Jake Diebler has made it a point. He made it a point from the time that he was introduced as head coach at Ohio State that he wanted to keep in-state talent in the state, preferably probably at Ohio State. Yeah, he wants to get the best talent in the state staying home and playing for Ohio State. He has done this with Darren Peterson. Now, the state hasn't been chock full of world beaters recently, but this is the one that you wanted. So when Jake Diebler has been talking about for now over a year when it comes to recruiting, he's talked about how he wants to capture players in Ohio and get them to Columbus. You got to think, at least at this time, that he's been thinking of Anthony Thompson this entire time. He's recruited him from before he was even head coach. He gets named head coach, and the staff is all in on a 5-star in Anthony Thompson. He's in your backyard, and you've got to think that all along, as Jake Diebler has said, how important it is to keep players in the state at Ohio State. You got to think all along that Anthony Thompson was a player he was thinking of. Now, the Adidas deal with Anthony Thompson, that made things more difficult. And I was ready to come on this show today. And for the past couple weeks, as we've known the decision date looming for Anthony Thompson, I was so ready to make the comparison to Darren Peterson last year. Another 5-star, heavily recruited. He visits Ohio State. A lot of blue bloods are in it. Gets to deal with Adidas. He plays small forward. Again, he's a 5-star. Ties to the state of Ohio. All of those different types of things. And yet again, Ohio State finishes in second place. But that's not the case here, as Ohio State obviously has gotten the pledge of Anthony Thompson. And the Adidas deal, it did make things harder, but not necessarily impossible, obviously. Last year, from what I understand, there's kind of a sliding scale here in terms of comp with Adidas. I don't know if this is agents working on behalf of the prospects or if this is, what Adidas is doing or whatever the case may be, but the deal that Darren Peterson had, he was going to get at least a measurable, a material amount of money less had he gone to a non-Adidas school. Instead, he goes to an Adidas school at Kansas this year. He'll be a freshman. Anthony Thompson apparently is to get less money by going to a non-Adidas school, but that sliding scale makes it much less of a difference and much more immaterial than it was for Darren Peterson. This win overall is a big deal for Ohio State. We were looking at Indiana, a program I've come on this show and trashed because I don't understand why they're seen so highly, not necessarily year to year, but just overall in their program's prestige. This is a program that hasn't made a Sweet 16 since 2016. That's when Tom Crean was still patrolling the sidelines. And they lost as a 1 seed, by the way, in the Sweet 16. That was the program coming across state lines to grab a 5-star and best player in Ohio, who not only is playing his prep ball in Ohio, but grew up in Ohio. He grew up down in Lebanon, in the Cincinnati, Dayton-ish area. So if that's the case, that's a big-time loss for Ohio State. If we're taking this the other direction where the Buckeyes don't get Thompson, which again, like I said, I've been thinking through what happens if they get him, what happens if they don't, what am I going to say? There's a lot I could say. If Ohio State weren't to win the services of Anthony Thompson, but this is a big deal, like I said, and you were looking at a program with the same amount of prestige as you, with the same amount of success as you, with a new head coach, and that's fine. Ohio State's head coach newer, but not in his first year, and they were going to come across the border and take your top player, and it's not your top player who's number 117 overall in the rankings. It's your top player who's a 5-star and top 8 consensus player in the class of 2026. So that would have been a big deal had you lost him, but you didn't. You won him. This is a player who, as well, not only are you beating Indiana, but he took visits to Kentucky, Texas, Michigan, and of course in Bloomington. Ohio State got the first visit, which Jake Diebler came on this very show this summer and said he never wants. He's not interested in the first visit. Sometimes the middle visit's nice. In the landscape of NIL, the last visit can be great. He hasn't been on campus in nearly 2 full calendar months. His visit was August 29th, 30th. It's now, we're in the tail end here, the latter third of October. So it's been a minute. And he last took visits. I believe his last visit was either to Kentucky or Michigan. I don't remember the date off the top of my head. But the fact that Ohio State is going up against Indiana and they're going up against real powerhouses like Kentucky and Texas and Michigan now seems like they're going to be just full steam ahead with Dusty May. Those are some big wins. Purdue made his final cut list as well. He had a bunch of other really, really strong programs like Auburn, North Carolina, also super interested in him at one point. I think North Carolina was the other that made his final cut list that Ohio State beats. That's a big deal. NIL North Carolina basketball is no joke. And the other thing I would say, I guess, Ohio State, it has plenty going against it right now as it relates to recruiting against other major programs in college basketball. NIL, whether we want to admit it and acknowledge it or not, it's just fact. NIL at The Ohio State University on the basketball side is not where it could be. Now, maybe it deserves to be where it is right now, and you could argue that. Maybe disagree with how Ross Bjork distributes the rev share money that Ohio State gets. That's fine. But regardless, you see the Block O on a Saturday afternoon, last Saturday, Ohio State's playing Wisconsin. If you're not locked in watching that game, you at least know why there's so many Block O's covering yards in this state and front doors and yard signs, and you and everyone's like, in this state, the brand power, it runs deep, and that's no different nationally. The Block O means something. It means a lot. So you would expect NIL to be really good at basketball. It's not. I've had plenty of people within the program who have more than enough knowledge on this, and they could have told me multiple times, yeah, we're in a great spot. That's not what they're saying. So the fact that you win Anthony Thompson, a 5-star, where NIL was definitely a real factor over other programs where they have NIL figured out in basketball, again, it's a big deal. This program itself has gone over a decade since it's been truly relevant on a national scale. You go through all the years with Chris Holtmann. You finally pick up a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament and you lose to Oral Roberts. And then from there, it was just bad college basketball from Ohio State under Chris Holtmann. Great guy, super kind, root for him at DePaul, but things didn't end well for him at Ohio State. You go all the way back to Thad Matta. Things did not end well for him either at Ohio State. We're looking at the Mark Loving years. Not great for the fan base. And that has led to toxicity in the fan base. And I'll tell you right now, I've talked to recruits who have chosen not to come to Ohio State, and I've also talked to those within the program. Other programs, if you don't hear anything on this show, you should hear this. Other programs negatively recruit against Ohio State because of the fan base. That's just a fact. The fan base is so toxic. The fan base, in some accounts, I'm sure not you watching the show, listening to the show, not you, but other fans out there, just not the smartest in terms of the fan base. I've talked to a couple people who have been around in the college basketball landscape. They say this fan base is no more or less toxic necessarily than many others out there, but the knowledge, the knowledge of the game, the knowledge of when to stand up and get loud during a game at the shot, it just doesn't seem to be there for whatever reason. I know that's not you, but that's a viewpoint that some within the program, that's a viewpoint that other prospects have, where they've chosen to not go to Ohio State because other programs negatively recruit against Ohio State because of the fan base. That's something that you can help control. You can help either fan the flames or you can put out the fire and just try not to participate in those types of things. But it's real. Ohio State loses recruits because of that. And it's no different here. It's not like Indiana wasn't negatively recruiting against Ohio State, talking about Ohio State's fan base and how toxic it is. But Ohio State still wins. They still get Anthony Thompson. And another reason this is a big deal. So the caveat here is this is a 5-star depending on where you look in Ohio State basketball history. But this is the first 5-star Ohio State's landed since 2014 when they got D'Angelo Russell. Again, he committed to Thad Matta. So this is not North Carolina. This is not Kansas. This is not Duke. These are not programs. Ohio State's not a program right now where you're just reeling in the 5 stars. And they've never been a program like that, who just reels in the 5 stars year after year. But they've gotten some great talent over the years. This is the first time you have a true 5-star since 2014. And again, it depends on where you look. On 247 Sports, if you go to D'Angelo Russell's recruiting profile, he's listed as a 4-star. But in terms of all-time recruits on 247 Sports, D'Angelo Russell listed as a 5-star. So I'm taking that. That's where I'm getting that number from. But this is the first time in over 10 years that Ohio State has landed a 5-star recruit. This is a big deal for Ohio State. Is it the biggest day? I mean, this is the biggest day for Ohio State basketball in how long? I can't begin to imagine over the past couple of years. Like, you look at the Ohio State win against Purdue when Jake Diebler was named interim head coach. That first game, that was a huge deal, I think, for Ohio State. But the season was still pretty much over at that point. You went on a nice run and you played your way almost onto the bubble under Jake Diebler that year. I mean, you look at the year Ohio State got the 2 seed. They still lost to Oral Roberts. There's been some good years in the past for Ohio State. But in terms of just a moment where it feels like this fan base can just have a collective release and take a deep breath and say, man, I think we might be okay. This is that moment for you as an Ohio State basketball fan. This is huge because Jake Diebler is in his second year. Jake Diebler has no social equity. He has no career equity built up with prospects, which means that other programs can negatively recruit against that as well. So now Jake Diebler wins his 5-star. You can start to have some hope that at least on the recruiting side, Jake Diebler is going to get some wins here, even while he's recruiting with one hand behind his back because the NIL landscape is not where it is for other college basketball programs. You look at the Big East. Look at Xavier, for example. Look at Dayton. Look at programs that are battling for in-state talent but don't have a football program to fund. That means something when it comes to NIL. That's why Jake Diebler came on this show, and I asked him, what would you change about college basketball if you could? He said, I want a sport-specific cap on spending. So that means that Xavier and Creighton and Georgetown and Seton Hall, they can't go out spend all the programs that have football because there's not enough money to go around. So all that said, the salesmanship by Diebler and his staff, that should be noticed. That should be celebrated. This is a big-time day for Ohio State basketball. We haven't even talked about the player yet. I guess we'll talk about the player. Anthony Thompson, number 8 overall composite player on 247 Sports. He's a number 2 small forward. And again, the number 1 player in the state of Ohio. Listed at 6'8", he's got a 7'3" wingspan. That is way above average for a 6'8" player. Incredibly long. He says he models his game after 2 players, Jason Tatum and Kevin Durant. And you see, based on his play, you understand it. He plays with a very comfortable and natural skill set, I would say. His length, his high release point, because of that 7'3" wingspan and the 6'8" height, it allows him to get off shots essentially in a phone booth. I mean, there's no separation. There's no space between him, the ball, and the defender, but he can still get the shots off because he's got a nice, high, quick release point, and he's tall enough already. And then defensively, because of that size and the athleticism he possesses, he can gobble up space, and he can close out in a flash. He's gifted athletically. He's got the ability to finish through contact. He's got an above-average vertical that continues to rise as well. So this is going to be a player who's going to be a do-it-all wing for Ohio State. The shooting, the driving, the defending, the shot blocking, the stealing, all of those types of things, it's a big deal. He's left-handed, so there's that. But Anthony Thompson is going to step onto campus next year for Ohio State and be expected to start. I mean, you look at the 3 next year. If Devin Royal returns, I don't know necessarily what happens there, but they're going to find a spot for Anthony Thompson on this team, obviously. They take the commit. They wanted him badly. They will find a spot for him. He's going to get big-time, real, instant impact minutes for Ohio State, and rightfully so. So moving forward, you may be curious, what does this mean for the class of 2026 now? So they've got Alex Smith from Upper Arlington, now playing his final year of prep ball down in Florida. He's locked in, committed. He's not going anywhere for Ohio State. Playing power forward. He's a 3-star who Ohio State really likes. And then you've got Marcus Johnson. He's a point guard. He's committed from the Cleveland area. The cousin of Michi Johnson as well, and the son of Sonny Johnson, who's a legend in Ohio State basketball in the state of Ohio. He's committed to Ohio State as well. That's your class right now. If you get those 3, that's great. Here's what I will say. I don't expect this to be the last move in the class of 2026. That's as specific as I'd like to be. And that may not mean what you necessarily think it means. But I do not expect this to be the final move in the class of 2026 for Ohio State basketball. Alrighty. Big day. Big day for Ohio State. Big get for Ohio State. Kind of cannibalizing the episode with Connor Lamons. In case you missed it, came out with another episode this morning and spoke with Connor Lamons from Bucketheads podcast and writes for Land Grant Holy Land. Highly recommend you give that a listen if you just want to feel uncomfortable. 40 minutes of us just dreaming. Doomsday scenario, worst case scenarios for Ohio State basketball this year. We'll come out with another show on Thursday with another special guest where we will talk through good, happy, sunshine, rainbows, flowers, pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. We'll go through best case scenarios for Ohio State. So I got you feeling uncomfortable for a little bit. We're going to get you comfortable again. Don't worry. Thanks for listening to today's show or watching on YouTube. Highly appreciate it. Please like the video if you've made it this far. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. We will continue to cover Ohio State basketball. I guess until the end of time, or I'm taken away from you. Appreciate you being here. Time for me to shut up before you shut me off. Go Bucks.